America used to be a paradise of cheap goods and opportunities. Whether you live in the city or the countryside, just step into Walmart or Target and you can buy almost everything at an affordable price. But now it's different.
A lot of prices are up high.
If people's income is not increasing at the same time, then they're pedaling backwards and they're struggling and they're not able to make ends meet.
That reality is spreading across the United States, from Seattle and Chicago to Mississippi and Alabama. Everything from meat, eggs, vegetables to medicine is now not only expensive, but also unavailable for purchase. The shelves are completely empty and prices are rising every week. And while large corporations are downsizing and closing stores en masse, ordinary people struggle daily to secure a nutritious meal. In today's video, we will take a look at the 10 states in the US that are most heavily affected by the food shortage crisis. If you ever thought, that doesn't concern me, stay until the end of the video. Because what is happening in these places could very well be knocking on the door of your own neighborhood, right now. California, where there are million-dollar houses, bustling streets, crowded sidewalks, and even bright Whole Foods supermarkets on every corner. Every weekend, people just need to drive a few minutes to buy enough fresh food for the whole week, from beef, vegetables, to milk, always ready on the shelves. We used to believe that in America, no one had to worry about hunger. However, now a paradox is gradually emerging. Inside the supermarket, many egg shelves are empty, the milk counter has been cleared out, and bread has now become something you have to find at the right time. As for the prices, you probably already have the answer. In the past year, according to estimates from the US Department of Agriculture, food prices in California have risen 21% higher than the national average. Rising prices in the US are directly affecting consumers, and they are clearly not happy at all.
It's ridiculous. It is. I mean, you know, what is that? $10 for a dozen eggs?
The eggs I usually buy, they used to be around like 7 something, now they're around like 10.
Eggs, once a familiar food, almost the cheapest that any American could buy, have now become something to consider carefully. Egg prices keep breaking new records. At a grocery store, the owner said there was no other way but to pass the increased costs on to consumers.
The cost of eggs has gone up a lot, so we've had to increase our prices significantly too. Without that, we wouldn't be able to get through this.
But what is even more frightening is not the prices, but the absence of goods. Large supermarket chains like Ralph's, CVS, and Sprouts have closed dozens of stores across the state. In Los Angeles, Sacramento, or Oakland, more and more residents are sharing that they have to visit multiple stores, ask employees, and wait for delivery trucks just to buy basic items for dinner. And that's for those who still have transportation and time. As for elderly people living alone, retirees with fixed incomes, or working-class families living in the outskirts, going to the market is no longer a familiar task, but rather a journey full of inconveniences and exhaustion. Not only have prices increased, but the items needed are no longer available. And it's not just the big cities. Small towns, suburbs, and rural communities are gradually turning into food deserts. Poor people, the elderly, and night shift workers are starting to weigh each item, even skipping meals. Families with young children have to cope with the lack of milk, lack of vegetables, or have to choose frozen foods instead of fresh ones. Health issues have become the top concern.
The reality is that families that are experiencing food insecurity are having to make really difficult choices about what they're putting on the table, and we're really worried about the health consequences of this.
For many years, the continuous rise in food prices has eroded our ability to consume the foods we should be eating more of. A retired man in San Bernardino shared, "In the past, I supported the whole family with my mechanic's salary, and we had enough to eat and wear. Now I have to choose between buying medicine or buying food." California used to be the American dream, where people came to live better lives. But now, when the very working class, the ones who built this state, can no longer afford to eat enough, does that dream still exist? New York, once considered the capital of the world, with the never-ending lights in Manhattan, the aisles of supermarkets once overflowing with goods. Everything you needed was for sale. But by the end of 2024, everything had changed significantly. New York is among the top places with the highest rates of food insecurity in the United States, especially in inland and rural areas such as Buffalo, Utica, or the Western Appalachians. In major cities like New York City, food prices have increased by nearly 25% in just 2 years. A carton of eggs can cost up to $7, and a simple bag of organic vegetables also exceeds $10. For those with low incomes, each trip to the supermarket is no different from a difficult math problem. Should I buy meat, or should I save money for next week's medicine?
It's very upsetting that we're going to have to pay more.
Recently, after weeks of protests and strikes in the transportation and retail sectors, coupled with the haunting memories of past shortages, many New Yorkers have chosen to stockpile. And so, the supermarkets, although still open and lit, had nothing left to buy.
I think the tariffs really pushed us into, we were coming just to look, and here we end up purchasing.
In the Bronx, Queens, or Brooklyn, home to millions of workers, the sight of an elderly person standing silently in front of an empty vegetable stand, or a young mother searching for a box of milk for her child in vain, is becoming a daily occurrence. But the injustice is not only happening in urban areas. In rural New York, a series of local stores, farmers markets, and small supermarkets have closed due to skyrocketing operating costs and the withdrawal of retail corporations. This forces thousands of residents to drive for hours to find a place to buy food. The elderly, those living alone, those without internet to place orders, all are being left behind. The communities that were once united, once full of hope, are now living quietly with their kitchen shelves increasingly empty. Many Americans used to believe that poverty and food shortages were issues of the third world. But that is happening right in the heart of America, and it might be just a few blocks away from you. And if even New York, the symbol of wealth and dynamism, is becoming so deprived, then what is really happening in this system that sustains America? And is there any solution to end this situation? Do you remember? There was a time when people flocked to Texas because of the affordable cost of living, where ordinary workers could live comfortably on minimum wage without any worries. But now, something that used to be as simple as going to the market each week has become a headache for many Texans. According to USDA statistics, in 2024, food prices in Texas are estimated to increase by an average of 17%, and in areas far from the center like El Paso, Laredo, or the suburbs of Houston, the increase could reach 20 to 23%. The stores that used to be always full of goods are now empty, as if they have just been through a storm. Empty shelves, scarce goods, skyrocketing prices. These are what you might face when looking for eggs, milk, and many familiar items at American supermarkets right now. This is the supermarket near my house in Houston. As you can see, even though the eggs are still on the shelf, if you look at the price, it's really hard to believe. Nearly $12 for a dozen eggs. Some types go up to $16, even nearly $18 for a dozen. Double compared to before. This is weighing heavily on the wallets of Americans, many of whom have not yet recovered from the wave of price increases during the pandemic. The food price crisis has now become an issue during Trump's term. Previously, Trump also promised to reduce grocery prices from his first day in office, but in reality, food prices, especially egg prices, have shown no signs of cooling down. Not only is it expensive, but it's also in short supply. The influx of people to Texas after the pandemic has caused the food supply chain to lag behind the pace of urbanization. Supply couldn't keep up with demand, goods were wiped out right after peak hours, and low-income families were left with empty shelves and wilted vegetables. The elderly, those without cars, and those living on social benefits are all being left behind. According to the survey, there are about 1.6 million households relying on food banks each month, and many people have to line up from 4 a.m. just to receive a few boxes of essential food. But what makes many people uncomfortable is not just the scarcity, but it is the ambiguity, when some affluent neighborhoods still have an abundance of goods, while working-class neighborhoods only receive the silence and indifference of the market. Texas used to be the pride of the American middle class. But when the families that once made this state strong can no longer access fresh food, perhaps we need to ask ourselves, is this still the America we once knew? And if Texas is also struggling every day like this, which state will be next to be affected? Florida, with its golden sunshine, endless beaches, and once a place where many dreamed of a leisurely life after retirement. But now, for many residents living in Florida, especially low-income workers, that dream has given way to reality: empty shelves and dwindling wallets. Florida is one of the states with the highest population growth rates during the pandemic. But what does this boom bring? The high demand from the people caused the supply chain to lag behind, and food prices skyrocketed. According to a 2024 report, food prices in Florida have increased by an average of 22%, higher than the national average. This increase, for the super rich and the upper class, is just a normal occurrence. But for ordinary workers, for retirees living on Social Security, it is a real challenge. In densely populated working-class neighborhoods like Tampa, Orlando, or Jacksonville, it's not hard to encounter scenes that many people thought only existed in an apocalyptic movie: empty shelves, long lines at food banks, and worried looks while holding discount coupons in supermarkets. The situation is becoming more concerning in coastal areas, where housing prices, gas prices, electricity prices, and now food prices are all rising uncontrollably. And for those who work hourly, earning by the shift, a single supermarket price hike also means having to cut back on meals. Florida is also witnessing the withdrawal of discount store chains, leaving those without cars almost trapped in their own neighborhoods, places with no more choices, no more fresh produce, no more affordable meat and fish. A retired man in Sarasota shared, "I used to think moving to Florida would be a peaceful retirement, but now I have to choose between medicine and food." Florida of the past was a dream vacation spot. But today's Florida forces many families to cut back on each meal portion, each type of food, each warm dinner. This makes many people wonder, so when will America truly allow all its citizens, regardless of wealth, to have the right to access a full meal? If even the vacation paradise is struggling like this, then is there anywhere safe? Alaska, a state famous for its pristine nature, snow-covered mountain ranges, and breathtaking landscapes. But behind that beauty, few know that Alaska is facing a major challenge, as the residents here are confronted with increasingly high living costs, especially food prices. In communities like Bethel, Nome, or Kotzebue, fresh food is almost a luxury. Here, the geographical distance is vast, and the climate is not very pleasant, so all goods, from eggs, vegetables, milk, to meat, must be transported from other regions by plane or ship. This means that transportation costs are skyrocketing, and consequently, food prices are increasing exponentially. According to the latest report, food prices in Alaska are twice as high as in other states, a shocking figure for those with low incomes. While most of America is accustomed to the concept of same-day delivery, Alaskans live off monthly, sometimes quarterly, supply shipments, and there is no guarantee that the next shipment will arrive on time. In a place where the weather determines the entire delivery season, just 1 week of strong winds can delay the supply shipments, and the residents have to rely on food stored from the previous month. And this has somewhat affected the health status of the people in Alaska. Lack of vegetables, lack of protein, and repeated consumption of nutrient-poor foods lead to conditions such as diabetes, high blood pressure, obesity, and malnutrition, all because they cannot afford a nutritious meal. Perhaps the most helpless feeling is standing in front of empty shelves, and food becoming a luxury is something anyone living in Alaska today can clearly feel. This has led many residents to wonder, is Alaska still a place where we can live peacefully? Or has it become a place so difficult that it is no longer possible to continue living here? Hawaii, in the eyes of many Americans, is a dream, a paradise with blue seas, white sands, and a temperate climate. Every year, Hawaii welcomes millions of tourists for vacation. But there is a little-known fact. the local people are facing a shocking food shortage. More than 85% of Hawaii's food must be imported from the mainland. That means when the supply chain encounters disruptions, such as during and after the pandemic or due to tariff policies, the people of Hawaii immediately feel the impact. Food prices soar, shelves are left bare, and meal options become increasingly scarce. A gallon of milk can cost up to $8. A regular loaf of bread can reach $6. Not luxury items, but just basic everyday foods that used to be commonplace in American life. Wage earners, retirees living on pensions, and even workers in the tourism industry, all are having to cut back on their meals, choose cheaper, less nutritious foods, or rely on free food support centers. More worryingly, small supermarkets and convenience stores in remote areas of the island have started to close, leaving communities stranded, without shopping places, without vehicles to move around, and even without enough money to order online. In a place that was once a paradise, it now feels like being forgotten. The children do not have a nutritious breakfast to go to class. The elderly have to divide their portions so that their meals last the whole week. And the young families, who once dreamed of a peaceful life in Hawaii, are now having to consider leaving simply because they can no longer afford to buy food in their own homeland. Tourists come to enjoy their vacation. As for us, the people of Hawaii, we are struggling to get by day, a phrase that has become familiar to many residents here. Hawaii is no longer a paradise for workers, for ordinary people living amidst high costs and inconveniences. And how many people can continue to hold on to a place that was once the dream of millions of Americans? And if the Hawaiians themselves cannot live in Hawaii, then who does this paradise ultimately belong to? Mississippi has never been among the wealthiest states in the United States. But the truth is that the people here always work hard, know how to live simply, and take care of themselves. They don't ask for much. They only need enough to eat, enough to live, enough to raise their children, and to maintain their dignity. But now, even that minimum has become difficult. The shelves are not completely empty, but what remains is unaffordable. Eggs, milk, bread, things that used to be trivial, now force them to consider every penny. In many small towns in Mississippi, the only supermarket in the area has closed or reduced its inventory, leaving residents with few options. A bottle of milk, a bag of fresh vegetables, or even a loaf of bread, things that once seemed small, have now become luxury items. Nearly 20% of Mississippi residents live below the poverty line, and in many communities, a car is a luxury. When the nearby store closes, they have nowhere else to go, so they had to make do with what was left: canned food, fast food, lacking in nutrition, and unhealthy. For many families with young children, going to the supermarket has now become a bargaining session with themselves. Buy milk or buy diapers. Buy cheap frozen food or fresh vegetables that are twice as expensive. And day by day, the meals became monotonous and lacking in quality. In communities that once lived by agriculture, buying fresh food is now harder than ever. The fields are still green, but the dining tables are devoid of vegetables. That paradox is the reality of Mississippi today. And there is a question that is not easy to voice, but always lingers in the minds of many people in Mississippi. If I work my whole life, pay taxes, and live decently, but at the end of my life still have to worry about whether there are eggs to eat today, then who does America keep its promise to? Chicago was once known as the city of opportunity, where immigrants and workers found jobs, housing, and a fulfilling life. But today, right in the heart of this city, many residents are living in a silent food desert, where the shelves are wide empty and even many supermarkets no longer open. According to the Chicago Health Atlas report, more than 500,000 Chicago residents live in food deserts, areas without supermarkets or large grocery stores within close proximity. And notably, most of them are workers, the elderly, people of color, and those living below the median income. While national food inflation has increased by nearly 20% since 2021, in some areas of Illinois, the increase is even higher due to a lack of local supply and high transportation costs. Each week, many families have to cut back on portions, swap fresh meat for instant noodles, and trade fresh vegetables for old canned goods just to keep their budgets from bursting. When you step into the neighborhoods of South and West Chicago, you will no longer see the grocery stores and discount supermarkets that were once the pillars of the community. Instead, there are only gas stations and fast food chains left, selling low-nutrition meals that are easily accessible and cheaper in the short term. To buy a variety of food products, many people are willing to travel miles just to buy fresh vegetables, clean meat, or simply a loaf of bread. But for those who do not have a car, are no longer young, or lack the strength, going to the market becomes a real challenge. And when food becomes scarce, the consequences are not just a hungry stomach. It also affects the health, both physical and mental, of a community, which includes both children and the elderly. Now perhaps the question is no longer, why are the supermarkets pulling out? But rather, why do we let millions of Americans fend for themselves in a country overflowing with food but not shared equally among everyone? West Virginia used to be a place where families lived closely for generations. A place where you knew the names of every cashier in the local supermarket. But now, those supermarkets are disappearing, and the people have little choice left besides gas stations and convenience stores. In the remote Appalachian regions, where the population is sparse and income is low, major supermarkets like Kroger and Walmart have quietly withdrawn from many towns, leaving behind empty, desolate buildings and communities in distress. According to a study by the West Virginia Center on Budget and Policy, nearly 30% of the population lives in food deserts, areas where healthy food is not accessible within a close radius. With over 18% of the population living below the poverty line, they simply cannot afford to drive far each week, and therefore they have to buy food at convenience stores, where there are more candies than carrots. And when the only options left are canned goods and sugary drinks, the consequence is the health of the people deteriorating. The rates of obesity, diabetes, and cardiovascular diseases here are among the highest in the United States. West Virginia is a wake-up call. Not because this place is too remote, but because communities like this once formed the solid foundation of America. So why, in this age of technology and abundance, do people have to live as if they were back in the 1930s, where a fresh apple has become a luxury? You can live in the bright sunshine year-round, but if every morning you have to decide whether to buy a loaf of bread or fill up your gas tank to go to work, that sunshine is no longer warm. That is the reality that tens of thousands of Arizona residents are facing. In the rapidly expanding suburbs around Phoenix, Tucson, or Yuma, the pace of urbanization causes houses to rise quickly, but the food supply chain and stores cannot keep up. What is the consequence? Communities living in the vast desert, but having to drive 20 to 30 minutes just to buy a few basic things for dinner. According to Feeding America, 1 in 7 people in Arizona are living in food insecurity, meaning they don't know where their next meal will come from. Among them, nearly 20% are children. And the worst part is, many areas with indigenous people or Latinx communities are being left behind, both in terms of food access and social support. In the Navajo Nation, the largest Native American reservation in the United States, many people have to drive 50 to 70 miles just to buy fresh food. Meanwhile, small local stores cannot compete with the large chains and have been closing one after another after the pandemic. And with summer temperatures reaching up to 110 degrees Fahrenheit, over 43 degrees Celsius, the lack of healthy food not only causes hunger, but also becomes a health concern, especially for the elderly and young children, those who are prone to dehydration, low blood pressure, and malnutrition. The final question, perhaps for all of us, is, since when has eating enough vegetables, buying a carton of eggs, or preparing meals for children become a challenge for many people in a country considered the richest in the world? We just traveled through 10 states, from California to Mississippi, from Alaska to Arizona, each place with its own unique color, yet sharing the same scene: sparse shelves, nutrient-deficient meals, and people having to calculate meticulously every time they shop. And we believe that the real stories of the viewers are even more important than the statistics in the video. Leave a comment. Which state do you live in? Do you still find enough food each week? Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell. We will continue to explore neglected topics, voicing the concerns of workers, the elderly, and vulnerable communities. This video is made for informational and educational purposes, based on data and reports from public sources. We do not represent any government organization, business, or political party. All expressed opinions aim to analyze, explore, and stimulate discussion. Thank you for watching. Hello, and see you again.